Now, for 12 days, Terri has been denied food and water as she's starving to death, and she's also being dehydrated. Now, starvation is obviously a crime in Florida under any other circumstance. It's even a crime to starve an animal to death. So why is removing a feeding tube an acceptable way to end life? With me now is Bill Allen. He's a director of the program in bioethics, law, and medical professionalism at the University of Florida College of Medicine. We also have attorney Janie Siess. She argued a 2001 California case that set a precedent on this matter. Let me begin with you, Bill. You heard Jesse Jackson talk about how this was immoral, how it was unacceptable. Obviously, emotions are running high. A lot of Americans, myself included, don't understand why it's ethically okay to deny food and water to this woman. Explain it to us, if you will, from a medical bioethics argument. Why is this the most humane thing to do?
Well, because if Mrs. Schiavo doesn't want this, then her wishes should prevail. And it's not food and water, it's an invasive procedure that requires an operation to give her fluids and nutrition that she can't swallow. So, and it shouldn't be called starvation. It's wrong to call it starvation. If this were withdrawal of a ventilator, you wouldn't call it suffocation if it's an appropriate withdrawal.
Would you put on the same level keeping nutrients, keeping food and water, or whatever you want to call it, from a patient the same thing as a ventilator or a respirator, where you've got a machine plugged in that's basically doing the work of lungs or other organs?
Yes, because it's not the complexity of the medical procedure that matters. It's whether the person finds it to be more of a burden than a benefit. And many people find feeding tubes to be that way. My own grandmother, the nurses said you could hear her screaming all over 2 floors when they put the feeding tubes down her nose. And then she sat up and pulled them out when they left the room, so they came in and tied her wrist down. She sat up and reached down to her wrist with her nose and pulled them out again. I think that's humane. If somebody regards it as something that they don't want, that's what's inhumane. So it doesn't matter whether it's feeding tubes or dialysis or a ventilator or even aggressive antibiotics. If it's a form of treatment where the person believes that the benefits aren't or outweighed by the burdens of the treatment, they should be able to refuse it.
Janie Siess, let me ask you your response to his statements, and also response to a lot of articles I've been reading talking about how humane it is, what a gentle death starvation is. The New York Times, in fact, had that in a headline just last week. Is starvation, is the deprivation of nutrients, of water, a peaceful way to die, as some are claiming?
Well, I'm not a doctor, but Ronald Cranford, the same neurologist who was involved in this case, testified in my case in California, and he described graphically the process of death. And it was anything but calm or peaceful. It was gruesome, it was horrific, and it involves pain. Now, the other thing that we need to remember here is that we're not talking about a ventilator for Terri Schiavo, and we're not talking about ending her life in a matter of a few minutes when you remove that ventilator. We're talking about a woman now who's in the 12th day of a gruesome, prolonged death. You're hearing reports that she's being given morphine. That's for a reason. It's because of pain. You're hearing that her eyes are sunken in. You're hearing that her skin is dry. Her tongue was too dry for them to give her the communion wafer, and she could only tolerate 1 drop of communion wine. That's because this woman is suffering. This is inhumane because there is precious little evidence of what Terri would have wanted, and there is no evidence that she would have consented to this type of death. And that's the real question. Does the person say to someone, I don't want to live in a disabled state? But then the second part of that equation is, do they understand that to release them from that disabled state might sentence them to this kind of death? And that's the point that I hear so many bioethicists, including Mr. Allen, missing.
All right, Mr. Allen, I'll give you the last word.
Well, I'm not missing that point. I know plenty of people who have said, if I have bone cancer and I'm dying of bone cancer and the pain can't be relieved adequately with narcotics, I want to refuse all kinds of artificial treatment. It doesn't matter what kind it is, whether it's feeding tube or ventilator or any other kind.
Bill Allen, do you think she's a person still?
Well, I think she's lost the distinguishing feature, she's lost the physiological ability for awareness, self-awareness, which is the distinguishing feature of human being, or if you will, even the divine image.
So she's not a person anymore because she doesn't have awareness?
If she doesn't have awareness, which is the case in persistent vegetative state, yes.
She is a person, and she has a substituted decision maker, a guardian, her husband, who is subject to the highest possible fiduciary duty, and it is his job to see that her rights are protected, and that's what has not happened in this case.
All right, Janie Siess, Bill Allen, thanks so much for being with me. I appreciate it.